I've been working on that for 15 years, and I've been warning the equestrian community that there will come a point where legislators and lawmakers and public opinion will scrutinize equestrian sports and say, why do we need to do this to these animals? Either you by yourself make the change, or in due course, the change will be made for you. But how am I destroying the sport? It's the perpetrators that are destroying the sport, not the whistleblowers. When the horse wants to do it, it's healthy for him, it's safe for him, but it's also much more functional and much more beautiful.
And I wonder what your thoughts on this are, Josepha, and how the industry needs to move forward, how the sport needs to move forward, and can it come back from there? Do you think of your horse as your pet? Josepha Guillaume is an international horse trainer, instructor and author of Dressage in Hand, What Horses Want You to Know. Josepha has roots in classical dressage and has worked with injured and traumatized horses for over 20 years, teaching and training dressage movements from the ground. Would giving horses pet status change the way that the equestrian world and sport see their animals? We talk about this in the episode and the difference it would make to the lives of horses. We talk about abuse, dancing equines and ethical training. We also discuss the shocking video that hit the news showing Charlotte Dujardin repeatedly whipping a horse. Let's jump into this episode, shall we? Josepha, when did you first start thinking of horses as pets over your 40 years working with equines?
I've always thought of horses as pets. It never occurred to me that they would be anything else, to be honest. And as a little girl, I dreamed of my own horse. And I dreamed of riding my horse without any tech. But riding wasn't the most important thing to me. I always wanted a horse as a pet, if I'm really honest. Now that you ask me about it, I never thought about it. But yeah, they're always pets to me.
And how do you think that's influenced your work as a trainer? How do you think that ideology and that thought process makes you different compared to other international trainers?
Well, I can't speak for or about others, obviously, but I never seen horses any different than cats or dogs or humans for that matter. And I'm always thinking about how I would undergo a certain action, or when somebody would treat me a certain way. I think about that a lot. And when I work with animals or when I interact with animals, I don't think in any different way about that. So to me, it's only logical that you treat someone the way you would want to be treated yourself. And to me, it doesn't matter if that is a human or an animal. And to some extent, I even think about what I do to plants, if I'm totally honest. Maybe I overthink things a bit too much, but to me, a horse is a friend, a person, a thinking person, a feeling person, a pet, and also family, or, I don't see any difference between animals and people in that respect.
Why do you think for so long horses haven't been thought of as pets like cats or dogs?
Because horses, and this is actually crazy when you think about it, for the last 6,000 years, they have built our Western society. Without them, everything would have been different, and we wouldn't have traveled across the globe and did all the things we did. They helped us with everything. They did everything for us. They grow our food. They were transportation. They fought in our wars. They did everything for us. So we really needed them for our survival, and I understand that. Having said that, even with that in mind, in the classical times, in the time of January Xenophon, 300 before Christ, and in the Renaissance and in the classical revival, it was talked about if you needed a horse assistance, you would need to befriend it in some manner. And and understand how to train with it in a way that the horse would like to cooperate. As Antoine de Pivernel said in the 16th century, you can never train a horse with fear because there will always be something he will fear more than you. But if he doesn't, he will ask you what to do in a fearful moment. So it's always been that we needed horses' cooperation, and of course we could subdue them with violence, but the end result was always better and safer for humans if a horse was your friend, just like a dog or a cat even. So I think in the 20th century, we have a change where we still have this image of a horse as a working animal, as an animal to be used. But because of how we changed it, we have no authenticity anymore. So we just use things up and then we disregard them because we do not need to survive anymore. And I think that is where it changed. We still have this image of a horse as a working animal, but horses also became a product, a means to an end. And they just never got the pet status that dogs and cats had for that reason, I think. At this moment, I think we are on a crossroads where in Western civilization, we have this one part of humans that still look to horses as a thing that we can use to our advantage. If it can be friendly, okay. If not, well, that's too bad. And we have more and more people who actually view horses as a person, as a family member, as a pet, and they want to do right by them. And I'm with the latter group also because I feel after 6,000 years of service to us, they give everything to us. They gave their lives. They gave everything. And now that we don't have the excuse anymore that we need them for our survival. Can we not just try for the next 6,000 years to even try to repay them for all the service they done for us? Could we do that? That would be my life's dream.
Oh, that was such a beautiful sort of monologue, Josepha, that you went off on there that was just transfixing to listen to. What do you think it will take to get the equestrian world to listen to what you've just said? And for those who don't see horses as pets and that they do see horses as service animals or sports animals or to have a job, how do you think you can change their mind?
Via public opinion, and this is happening at the moment. I've been working on it for 15 years, and I've been warning the equestrian community that there will come a point where legislators and lawmakers and public opinion will scrutinize equestrian sports and say, why do we need to do this to these animals? There's no use. And they will see it as abuse because there is a lot of abuse going on. That's just the way it is. There's nothing around that. And even there are a few within equestrian sports who try to do well by the horse. It's not the majority. So for 15 years, equestrians have always been like, well, we need to self-regulate because only we know what horses need. And if you do not have the experience with horses, you cannot judge. But this is changing. The public opinion is becoming aware. And one of the most important things that has happened over the course of the last year and the last Olympics, the incident with the pentathlon, with the horse that was being whipped and public opinion speaking out. And then finally, with all the scandals around health strength dressage, that a journalist went undercover and then brought everything that goes on there into the public eye, with that note that this is not an exception. This happens at a lot of equestrian sports stables, whether it be racing, dressage, or jumping. I have seen it a lot in my lifetime. And now that public opinion is aware, legislatures become aware. And when that happens, we equestrians will either have to change with how public opinion views horses should be treated, or we might, at least I can speak of the European Union, or we might lose the right to have competitions with horses, or maybe ride or even keep them all together. So either you by yourself make the change, or in due course, the change will be made for you.
And we have to mention that we know that a dressage star and trainer's currently under investigation, don't we, by the FEI after a video hit the press in the last few days showing her repeatedly whipping a horse. And I wonder what your thoughts on this are, Josepha, and how the industry needs to move forward, how the sport needs to move forward, and can it come back from this?
Yes. The thing is, you see sort of two split groups of reaction. One is saying that, supporting her, saying that it was a mistake and we all make mistakes and she could do better now. And the other group say, when this is totally unacceptable and this is not an occurrence, this is standard practice in many stables, and this is also not the only time she did this. And I'm with the latter group because I've seen this over and over again, and I myself are very traumatized by the equestrian world. And it takes a lot of courage and determination from me to step out in the open time and time again. And I'm doing this for my fight for the horses because I rather would just not be in social media at all and remain under my stone for the rest of eternity. So I'm doing this purely for my fight for the horses. And because it's now within the public opinion, so the non-horse people with newspapers like The Guardian, but also all the tabloids and everything that is mainstream media at the moment, makes it so that the equestrian federations and professional equestrians, have to have an opinion about this. Then you still have the people who try to swipe this under the rug, like that's just an incident and just a bad apple, and we all make mistakes, can happen, on to the next. But this time it won't fly. And the opening to that was Project X, the documentary on Andreas Heldstrand, which has shown the public what does happen in these stables, which is also not behind closed doors. Because, for instance, Ipona TV, for 15 years, they have been showing videos and photos of all these things happening. And everybody's like, oh, that's horrible. Okay, on to the next. So public opinion is now on this, and non-horse people, in my experience, are often more clear about what is abuse and what is not. They see clear abuse. They see when a horse is in pain. Well, we equestrians, we should see this, but often we don't for some reason. And this is what's happening now. And as a result, sponsors are pulling back. And when that starts to happen, when sponsors are starting to pull back because of public opinion, that is where riders will have to evolve and start paying attention to that. And I think that the people in charge that own the horses and that put the pressure on the riders, well, let's also talk about that. There's a lot of pressure on them. And I don't mean to say that I understand it or that I agree with what's happening, but they are also in a difficult situation because they are expected to do everything now, or else they lose this and they lose that. So that is probably what makes them start the abuse in the first place. So, but when sponsors are starting to pull back, that is where it will end. And if equestrians no longer go to these events, that is where this will end. And I also think if you look over the course of the last 40 years, dressage was very different in the 80s and before. But then there wasn't any pressure on the riders and the horses. They just went there to see what their progress was. That's why you went. But then the big money came in, the sponsors came in, and then the pressure came to perform. It wasn't so much as to see where am I at with my horse and what should I be work on next. No, now it was a performance where you have to have these things, you have to be able to show, you have to win. And that's a totally different mindset to be in. Now I think we are at a turning point where slowly sponsors will pull back, as I said, public opinion will be swayed, and these so-called elite riders that force horses and keep them in solitary confinement and all these things, they will slowly but surely either have to change or they will just disappear out of the limelight.
And you mentioned the limelight, but that's another thing that's changed as well, isn't it? As well as winning and gaining their accolades, they're gaining fame and celebrity and all that comes with that as well in the process. So sort of taking them out of just the remit of the equestrian world and turning them into stars. And of course they have a responsibility, don't they, to look after their animals and to maintain high standards of animal welfare. And are we now going to see a look into the equestrian sport as a whole and see that actually this hasn't been happening?
I think so, yes. There is this group now that is blaming the victims and the whistleblowers who come forward with this kind of thing. For instance, they were saying that she only came forward because she wanted to hurt Charlotte, because she waited for 2 years and then do it right now before of the Olympic Games. So she wasn't doing it for the horse welfare, but she was doing it to hurt Charlotte. Yeah, Charlotte is hurt, but you know who is also hurt very much? The horse. And also the girl was 15 at the time. Now, are you really going to tell me that everybody is that brave to go up against that large of a machine, especially when you're 15 years old? It took her a very long time to find the courage and to find the legal way, because they can sue you. And you are only a tiny bug in a bucket. And they can sue you for all your word and destroy your life. Yeah. And it was very brave of her. And it was very smart of her to wait until she had a lawyer that had the knowledge and the courage to go up against this. Now, this happens to be right before the Olympics. But maybe that's also not a bad thing, because now it has a very huge impact. If she would have come forward years ago, the impact would not have been that big. And maybe that's also because of Project X and because of public opinion changing, that she felt that now I can do this safely. Now I will have public opinion and the press on my side. Whereas she would have done that years ago, that would not have happened. So people are angry at whistleblowers. I often get attacked saying that I am destroying the sport, and if I have my way, we will not be able to allowed to have horses. But how am I destroying the sport? It's the perpetrators that are destroying the sport, not the whistleblowers. So this is what's happening a lot. I get threatened, I get death threats, I get accused of destroying the equestrian world and whatnot.
And why do you get death threats? What's that in reaction to, Josepha?
Yeah, they think because I highlight these incidents, I put the sport in a bad light, where in reality, according to them, it isn't. And then public opinion wants the sport to be abolished. So they see the whistleblowers as the cause of this and not the perpetrators. And they tell themselves these are incidents, but they are not. This is general practice at most stables. With the hand on my heart, I can tell you that that is the case. And I'm not saying all riders are bad or all equestrians are bad or all professional riders and trainers. No, not at all. There are very good people out there. There are very good trainers out there. But where performance becomes very, very important because of money, very often the pressure on horses, the pressure on people, it ends up in abuse in many cases. And not all, but many. And this is what needs to change. And only when we acknowledge it to ourselves that this is happening and that it needs changing and that horses deserve this change. They deserve it. Come on, people. What have horses done for us? They deserve it. And we can give it to them. We have all the resources to give it to them. And horses that are allowed in a species appropriate way to live and fed and cared for, they will even perform better. They will perform much better. Because what human athlete do you know that has solitary confinement 24 hours in a little room, has to eat nothing but food that is bad for him, and has iron shoes clamped to his feet like this, for 24 hours, which he cannot take off? He's not allowed any contact with other people. He's not allowed to go out. He's not allowed to have free movement. He's not allowed to do anything. He just has to do his training. And when the training is not up to the standards of the trainer, he gets beaten. Which human athlete would choose that? That's one thing. And secondly, could perform to his best. Nobody would, in his right mind, would think to do that to a human athlete. Why do we do it to horses? It doesn't make any sense. You are making it much more difficult on the horses than it needs to be. Because if you let them live species appropriately, a racing horse, there will still be one going over that finish line first. There will still horses jump the fences and go fastest and without mistakes make these rounds, and there will still be dressage horses doing these movements, which are inherently then natural movements anyway. So why are you making it so difficult on these horses? There's no need. No need to do this at all. You just have to let them be horse first, give them some more time, start with training with positive reinforcement, and you get much better results. But maybe not as fast and as eccentric as people would like it. I get that. But yeah, it's either that or maybe nothing at all in the coming years.
And Josepha, you say this with experience as someone who started out in classical dressage. And when you mention what you've seen, can you let us in, without naming names, to other incidences that you've seen within the dressage sphere that actually is classed as abuse, that is going on behind closed doors?
Yes, I've seen many horses that came out of back doors of very high-end dressage or jumping stables that were completely traumatized and physically kaput, destroyed, not able to even bend their necks like this, or arthritis throughout the whole body, even stress-related heart problems. Horses that were so sad, so broken. It took a lot of work to be able to just make them feel safe and without constant pain. And I'm talking about stables and riders that were in the Olympics and that were really high-end, winning all the national championships in Europe and so forth. And I have seen things and I've heard things from my students who were first at those stables thinking that their horses were going to have a great, happy athlete education, and then came back completely destroyed. The things they've seen. There's also my friend Lonneke Engel, the model from the 90s, well-known model from the 90s, who had her horse at a certain stable, and he was also destroyed. And she had 9 years of legal, what's the word here? She went to court with legal action. It
Legal
took her
battles.
9 years to, even with all the proof she had, to prove that her horse was damaged at that stable during the training. I think if she would have had this now, at this moment, her case would be much stronger and she would have much better result. And it would end in the responsible owners of that stable to be, I'm looking for the words, indicted for animal cruelty, which has happened to Andreas Hellstrand at the moment. Chances are great that it will also happen to Miss Dujardin.
And how did your beginnings in classical dressage inspire you to work a different way and to look into and create dressage in hand?
Yeah. I didn't create Dressage in Hand. I just named it that because people never knew what it consisted of. And I thought, well, it's literally just dressage movements, but then in hand because you work next to your horse. So that's why I named it that. And then most people understand immediately what it is. But I didn't invent it. It's something very old. Even 1300 before Christ, the well-known trainer Kikuli, he trained his army horses, his chariot horses in hand. And he was the one everybody would get to train his armies because his horses always won. So he trained the soldier and the horse together, and they worked in hand, and they ran together. They were trained together in hand. So they trained the soldier on the ground next to the horse, and at the same time, the horse got trained for the chariot, and they became a team. So that is very much inspiring. He was also the one that invented interval training, which is huge now in the fitness world.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So, and then of course you have Sino Fong, who trained the war horse, and he was also on about having the perfect conditions. For instance, after the barefooted horse, because horses were barefooted up till the medieval times. We do not use shoes for a very long time, a few hundred years, but all the 1,000 years before, horses were always barefoot, and people were then very aware of that you had to breed with horses with healthy feet and then keep them free movement on paddocks made with river stones. So Xenophon said that you had to instruct your slaves to get stones from the river and put them in the paddock to take care of the hooves of your horse. So very happy to say we don't have slaves anymore, but we still have river walks, so we could get those and put them in our paddocks.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's...
And how do those river rocks help the horse's hooves?
Because they naturally trim and harden the hoof and make the hoof functional as they do in nature, where horses walk over rocky soil in the summer for 16 to 24 hours. So every time the foot goes down onto a hard surface, it sort of stretches out, and when it's lifted up again, then it goes back to the smaller shape that it has. And this ensures that blood is poured in and liquids are going out. So you never have filled legs when a horse is able to move freely and has the function of his feet fully without any restriction. And then the soft tissue of the foot that gets that develops larger and takes over the structure of the foot, and then you have a functional foot. And they knew that for thousands of years, but somehow in medieval times this knowledge got lost. And I can honestly say that using iron shoes is a medieval practice because that is when it started.
And tell us more about dressage in hand, because until I stumbled across your work, Josepha, I had no idea you could do dressage in hand, working together on the ground instead of in the saddle. How do you go about training
Yeah.
dressage from the ground?
Well, it's actually quite a simple thing because the movements horses make that we call dressage movements is actually their language. That these movements they make to communicate with each other. So that's the first thing. So if you want a dressage from a horse, you would just have to communicate to him that you want certain thing, want him to say certain things to you, and then you would get him. The second thing is that because horses communicate with body language, they can communicate with humans very much in the same way. Obviously, we are not horses, but horses react to our body in a similar way than they react to each other's bodies. So when you are with a horse and you're moving or you're standing, breathing or whatever, you're always communicating something to your horse, and your horse is always reacting. So if you know what you're communicating and you are aware of what you're communicating, you're doing it anyway. So why not be aware of it and use that to your advantage? And then if you start talking to your horse and he can see you, he's next to you, and you can start to ask, for instance, shoulder in, which is the basic exercise for everything else and is a very healing exercise for each and every horse. And they will respond to it. And when they do respond, then you just reward them for it. But also they start to feel, hey, this makes me feel really good. I'm powerful. This empowers me. I feel more strong, more supple. I feel really good. I can breathe better. And so there's a double reward. And, horses really get addicted to this kind of work. Obviously, riding is also a form of body language and a form of physics. So you influence with your weight aids and the way how the physics works to your body. You can influence the balance and the physics of the horse. And the body language, where do you touch the horse, and so on. This is why the aids are the aids, because they are actually a type of physics applied to the horse's balance and body. But when the horse can see you, then you can just interact purely on body language. And you can ask all these things of the horse that help him to, straighten out or get off his shoulders or have a better balance, or collect or have better movement. And I think it's one of the biggest tools in the toolkit to have to help horses that ought to be ridden. If you do this before you go onto your young horse, then he's already balanced and strong and powerful and flexible and straightened out, and you can do all the exercises you would need to do that on the saddle. He can already do when you go on him. I think that's he doesn't have to struggle with your weight and then try and do these things. He can already do it with your added weight. And that keeps him safe and sound for, say, the next 20 to 30 years if you wait till your horse is mature enough. And this is it's a thing to have in your toolkit. The body language. Yeah, you can communicate with your horse, and you can ask your horse to do all these things that helps him be more flexible and strong and healthy. And if you want to give your horse a job, which I am not against, be it jumping or being a police horse or being dressage or racing or whatever, doesn't matter. You can do these things better and longer. It's more sustainable, and you will be more durable. And of course, happiness and health are interrelated and for everyone. But for horses, in my experience, that's just the perfect winning combination to have in your toolkit.
And because of what's going on in the news at the moment, both equestrians and non-equestrians will wonder, what is dressage? How do the professionals get horses to do those very exquisite movements that make the horse look like they're dancing? And some of those movements do look unnatural. How do you, Josepha, get the horse to move using dressage movements in that way of picking up their legs and picking up their feet. Would you be able to explain your techniques and your methods for those who might now think, oh my goodness, what does that training entail?
Yeah. So as I explained, these are natural movements to each horse. Maybe stallions and geldings more so than mares, but they can obviously do the same movements. So what you have to do is you entice those movements, and every movement has a certain meaning. For instance, piaffe and passage is something a horse does out of, presenting himself and being prideful and all of that. So when you make your horse happy and pride, and you bring a lot of happy energy to him, the horse is more inclined to starting to show himself, and he will start moving more collected, and or maybe do a little passage or a little piaffe like he would when he was playing with his friends. So the moment you see a tiny inkling of towards that, then you reward it. You say like, yeah, that's what I want. And then you sort of make what would you say that, another command, but you make an appointment with your horse. So when I do this, can you then do that what you did just now? And you always reward it either with a treat or with your voice. Horses love when you are happy and you say like, oh, good. Science even catches up with that, saying that horses love baby talk. They do. And when you have a high frequency, happy voice, they really respond to that, especially stallions. They really love that when you do it. And the happier you make them, the more light and the more fluid and the more collected a horse will move. Because to a horse, collection is actually a smile. And you cannot force a smile. So you can force the frame of collection, but it's not really collection. It's sort of a caricature, if you will, of collection, but it's not really that. And we see that actually a lot in competition, because these horses are forced to do certain movements, and then indeed they are not natural anymore. Like when you have a dancer, but you would force him to do a certain move he's not ready for, and force him to do it over and over and over, and then the movement would become harmful, but also not beautiful. We want what we call in the Renaissance sprezzatura, which means that something that looks very easy and elegant, but actually it takes a lot of practice to perform it. But this can never be forced. If it's forced, it's not beautiful. So people in the past were very aware of that, and nowadays we've sort of lost sight of that. And I would really like to bring that back. And when you want to work with initiative of the horse and reward every time you entice him. For instance, you want the horse to come towards you, then you change your body language, you sort of pull him into you like other horses would, opposite of them. And the moment you see that he comes towards you, then you reward him. It's something different than put a horse on a halter and then pull like, come here, and then stop pulling when he comes. That's totally opposite way of working. So the next time, if you done the pulling and the horse is free, he won't come to you. But if you work with enticing him and rewarding him, the next time he will most definitely want to come to you. So when the horse wants to do it, it's healthy for him, it's safe for him, but it's also much more functional and much more beautiful. The only thing is you need obviously some more patience for that. And sometimes you get different things than you had in mind. But keep in mind that these things you can use too. So maybe you didn't want them today, you want something else. Doesn't matter. The thing you wanted, the other thing you want, you can maybe get tomorrow or the day after. Everything you get, you can use. And just use it and be thankful for it, and start putting it on queue so you can request it when you would like to have it. And that's the way it works. It takes time, but especially with those horses that Grand Prix riders have, these horses are so extremely talented. they can give you this in an instant. So I actually don't understand why they are making everything so hard on those horses. They are actually more fighting against them. If they would sort of organically let it happen and then reward, it would be far more easier. It would take a little longer, but the result would be much, much better.
It's interesting that there's dressage under saddle, but there isn't dressage in hand competitions. Do you think that's where we go wrong as human beings? Someone decides actually there should be a competitive element, it should become a sport, it should become something that people win trophies for, and then it changes the nature of what we're doing with our animals.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say go wrong. I have nothing against competition riders or competitions. Not very interesting personally to me, but I have nothing against it at all. And I think it can also be done in a way that does not interfere with a horse's basic needs. And a horse doesn't need to be abused to do competition if the mindset of the people would change. And in the past, like I explained, it was actually just a way to see where am I in the education of this particular horse and what do I need to work on. But because of, like what you said, the limelight and that people got stars and famous and all the money that goes around put so much pressure on them that the incentive of the competition has changed. So if we could somehow change the format of what performance would look like, that it would be more into what is healthy and natural to horses. But also, if the FEI would rule according to their own original rules, that would already be a lot helpful. Because if you read the original rules, which Einar Schmidt Jensen typed out on his typing machine, I think it was in the 30s of the last century. I have a copy of that here. That is not what you see judges rewarding within the tests at the moment. So if you would just go back to that, and you would think more about what is healthy and healthy for a horse, and it would also take the pressure off of the riders to always have to perform certain exercises at certain points, that would relieve them of a lot of pressure. If it would just be about how the horse was going, how does he perform the exercises, and not so much where he does them, at what second he does them, and that it doesn't matter if some exercises are not shown today, for instance. And if also they would give the riders choice to use a double bridle or a snaffle or bitless bridle or no bridle at all or spurs or not, riders need the choice to do what they think their horse enjoys the best and what works the best for their horses. I think in New Zealand already now they have abandoned the rule that nose bands are mandatory, which is also a very good thing. But it would be good if there weren't any nose bands at all. Obviously, unless bitless, because then you would need one. Because then that would rule out all the stuff with the very tight nose bands, in which horses can hardly breathe because they are obligate nose breathers and they cannot in any way relax their jaw. So with a tight nose band, collection is absolutely out of the question because a horse needs a loose and a relaxed jaw and a correct movement of the poll and the jaw to be able to lift the withers and put the hind hand under. So with a tight nose band, collection is made absolutely impossible to begin with. So I think with tiny adjustments, with the horse in mind, and relieving the pressure of the riders to have to show certain things now and like this and like that and bit and back and higher, that would, I think, be the change we need in this 20th century.
It's really interesting talking about tack and what we choose to use and what we are shown from a young age, or whenever you've joined the equestrian world or industry, I remember as a teenager learning to lunge horses, and it just was always the riding school protocol to lunge in a bridle, put them on the lunge, off you go, and that was the safest sort of tack to use for yourself and for the horse, and you would have control with the bit, and that would be best practice. So when I then started rescuing horses in my 20s, I've got my lovely Winnie, who's now 8 years old, but got her as a 4-year-old. And she came to me, as you mentioned, traumatized, and she'd been beaten by previous people. She'd had 5 homes under 4. She was passed from pillar to post. She was very untrusting of humans and very nervous. I began working with her very gently and slowly on the ground, and we started lunging, and we found great fun together in setting up obstacle courses, and she loves jumping and teaching her voice commands, walk, trot, canter and stand, and we've built up an incredible bond. But it was only years later that I had Winnie, maybe 4 years into having Winnie, that one day I needed to put her on the lunge for the vet to have a look at how she was moving. I didn't have the bridle to hand, and I thought, oh, she'll be fine in a head collar. But I thought, oh, I felt a bit uncomfortable, because I thought, gosh, I've never lunged in just a head collar. I've always lunged with a bridle and a bit. So it was very much going against what I'd been taught as a horsewoman. But I thought, oh, she'll be fine. Off we go. And to my disbelief, the horse in front of me was relaxed. She lowered her head. She was round. She looked like she was on the bit, but she had just a head collar on. She did the most beautiful floating trot, and my jaw almost dropped. And I thought, wow, the movements we aim for as owners, the lovely, relaxed and happy and comfortable movements we want to see, have been achieved by me letting go, putting her in nothing other than a standard head collar and just letting her do her thing. And that to me was a moment where I then started thinking, I need to relearn what I've been taught from my teenage years, because actually your superiors aren't always right.
No, they aren't. At least not in everything. Yeah, you just described what I was actually talking about. So when you give the horse the opportunity to just become a functional horse, then the horse can do all these things that we need them to do because they are horses. We just have to allow them to be horses. Free movement, and offer them as extra. We can offer them the exercises, but they have to do them themselves. I've also been a fitness instructor for a long period of years, so I've been training humans as well. And I see the dressage exercises a lot of the same as, fitness exercises. And when you train a human, then you do not tie the human up and start pulling and pushing and pressing them into what you think is a nice frame and screaming at them and whipping them. You don't do that. You encourage, you entice, you give good example. You explain, you show by means of your body, you give the good example so your pupil can follow up on you. And then you encourage your pupil. You say, oh, good, yes, that is what I need. That is not so good, you ignore that. Yes, this is it. And then come on, one more, you can do one more. Just do, yes, excellent, good. I train is very the same way with horses. I mean, I'm at that point, I am like a physical fitness instructor, and to be that, first and foremost, you need to understand the anatomy and the biomechanics of your pupil before you can design a functional and healthy workout. A lot of people don't even have that, yet they are trainers. And they let pupils do things that brings the horse only onto the forehand or in a state of due injury. I see that a lot, and I don't understand that at all. If you don't know how the biomechanics of a horse works, why are you even training one? Imagine going to a fitness and you have a trainer there who brings you within a few sessions to an injury, would you go back to that person? Would that person long have a job? Yet many sort of professional trainers have jobs even in high end. I've seen it in Spain where I took over a group of riders, Grand Prix riders, for a little while. And there was just, they got injured all the time, and they didn't understand it was because of the training and because of the trainer. Luckily, the eyes were open after I started working with them. But this is also an incident. This is quite normal within the equestrian sports, and science tells us that the general age of a dressage horse is 7, and that they are kaput before the age of 12. Now, if you think that a horse can easily be 35 or 40 years old, that would be like we humans having to retire because of being completely injured around that we're like 20 or 21 years old. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And I think a lot of people are not really aware of this, and they don't mean to be bad to horses. They are sort of in this stream in which they just go along, and they're not fully aware of what's going on. So I'm not saying that these people are all evil or something. I don't believe that. Maybe some that are constantly abusing and then laughing at all time. I'm not talking about those people, but there are a lot of trainers that just do as they have been taught, and that get sort of results within competition also. And if these people come in contact with classical dressage, that usually opens them up, and I'm like, yeah, that makes much more sense. So yeah, I'm happy that there are some trainers out there. As for instance, my former mentor from the Spanish Riding School of Vienna, Helmut Oberhauser, he is training a lot of competition riders, and other of the former Oberbereiters and other bereiters are doing this. And I think this is a very important thing to make sure that the so-called elite riders have access to that kind of training from classical dressage, which is much more horse-minded and from the biomechanical function of the horse, and not so much to gain certain performances in the littlest amount of time, so to speak.
And for those who don't know, Josepha, what is the difference with classical dressage? What does that bring?
That within classical dressage, you work with what you've got, and you simply entice the horse to do what is natural to him, and that you try not to destroy what is already naturally there, and you try to enhance what is already naturally there. And that takes time. For instance, in Vienna, they start with 4.5, 5 years, very slowly. And the education, the school is not complete until the age between 12 and 15 years. And then the horses can easily do these high school movements every day, which are much more demanding than actually a Grand Prix test of 5 minutes is, much more demanding. And they can do it easily up to 27 years of age. And then they retire, and not because they are broken, but simply because they deserve their retirement to go back to Piber and be where they grew up, and just be a horse and maybe cover some mares and that sort of stuff. So we need that back. We need that back. If we want horses to perform, that is actually the way to go. But the powers that be, the money and the federation, everybody needs to start to give trainers, riders and horses the time to do so. Just give people time. Take the pressure off. Take the heat off. Start enjoying the movement, and make it more of a dancing sort of thing, where you just enjoy what is naturally there. Not make it so much of a point system with mandatory movements you have to show at a certain period of time. I think that would help a lot. That would take the pressure off.
Make it less structured and,
Yeah,
and more natural.
yeah,
That's really,
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah,
And Josepha, I talked about my rescue horse, Winnie, but you work and have done throughout your career with traumatized and vulnerable horses. How does Dressage in Hand and your more gentle training help them to rehabilitate?
yeah. I noticed. I can't even count how many horses I work with in my life on 2 continents actually. And what I noticed most with horses who were fearful, traumatized, and depressed is that their body also shows that. So they are in a constant state of hanging onto their forehand, having their lower neck muscles, the brachiocephalicus, engaged, and they have their withers dropped, they have their thorax dropped. So their whole body situation is droopy. And with that body situation, they cannot communicate effectively to other horses, which often puts them in problem and trouble when they are in a herd and then they get placed alone, which makes things even more worse. And I then read many years ago this sort of research from an American psychiatrist who found that if people were depressed and he made them act as if they weren't, he made them laugh, he made them stand up straight, he made them dance and prance around and all of that, that their mental state would improve. And then I thought, what if I would do that with depressed horses? So what do horses do when they're happy? They do this movement with their upper neck muscles, the trapezius. They engage it. In French, it's called ramener. And that's what they do when they are happy, when they're playful, when they meet each other, when they feel pride, and so forth. So I thought, what if I entice a traumatized horse to do this? And the effect was, it was mind-blowing. You see them sort of awaking from this sort of sleepy state they are in. They they are cut off, they are not present anymore, and you just see them awaken like they just sort of, you can contact them at that moment. They are there and you can connect, and they feel, for a brief moment of time, they actually feel happy and pride. Okay, it wears off. It's not a cure-all and you don't cure the problem in a few minutes. But you have your opening to that horse's mind to help him to start working his body. And when he starts working on correcting the thorax, to get him to lift again, to get off the shoulders, to engage the trapezius. These are all the muscles, which I call the happy muscles, the muscles horses use when they are happy and playful and so forth. Not only are they able to effectively communicate with other horses again, so they can be placed in a herd, they start to feel different. And then when that starts to happen and they are open to your suggestions as trainer, they start trusting you and they start like, you know what? Everything you ask for me makes me feel good. What more have you got for me? And then you can sort of start with the thing that traumatized them and help them gain control over the situation. And that's how I work with horses in a situation when I work with something that they have certain fear of or is a trauma trigger to them. I make them in complete control of the situation. And I, disclaimer, don't try this at home. I make them in complete control of me. So they have all the control and they can stop whatever they want to. They can send me away whenever they want to. They can send the thing that they fear away when they want to. And gradually, I let them decide how to handle the situation. And very gradually, they overcome their fear. They feel empowered again. The self-learned helplessness disappears and they overcome their trauma. Now, I have to say, once traumatized, you are forever changed. Your trauma will never go away.
I
What?
was about to ask you that.
Yeah, your trauma
Yeah.
will never go away. You are forever changed. Everything is changed about you. But you can learn to overcome your trauma triggers and not lose control to the trauma triggers, but stay in control when the trauma trigger occurs. And that is where I help horses. And that is what I've been doing mostly is either rehab injury or helping horses overcome mental trauma that hindered them in their normal interaction in daily life.
That is so fascinating what you were saying, Josepha, because I was thinking ahead of our interview about the idea of traumatized horses, obviously knowing that my own horse had a difficult background. And so often in the equestrian world, you hear the phrase, I want to get a young horse because it's unspoilt, because other people haven't had their training methods on them, haven't, badly abused a horse or haven't done anything difficult with this horse and changed it. And I was thinking, but is it possible to rewrite that story? Is it possible for a horse to overcome its trauma? And you so beautifully summarized that idea that actually they can overcome it, but they are forever changed. And isn't that so true of humans as well? If anyone's been through a traumatic event or something's happened to them in their lives, they can move on with their lives and they can progress forwards, but they may be forever changed by that. And actually, that shouldn't be seen as a negative, should it?
No, that's just as is. That's just what happened, and you cannot change it. And the fact that you cannot change it indeed makes it so that it shouldn't matter. On the subject of young horses, though, many people nowadays indeed think I'll get a young horse and then I will not encounter any trouble. But we wouldn't be the Western society we are today if we would not create problems in that department as well. And for thousands of years, we knew that horses first need to be horses and socialized by other horses, very much the same way as humans need to be socialized by family. You know, when they say it takes a village to educate a child.
Yes.
It's the same way with all social animals, especially horses. So horses need to be in a functional herd, even if it's tiny, because the big herds you see on television consist actually of little family bands from, say, 3 to maybe 10 horses. So 3 to 10 horses, a family would be okay for a little one to grow up. Would be best to have other little ones present also. But adults of different ages, genders, and family connections, that is what horses need to understand how to function within the world. So, for instance, if you would have a human child alone with its mother for 18 years, and then that child would go out into the world, the child would only know how to interact with other humans as it would interact with its mother. And you know how we are with our mothers, how we climb onto them and we do everything to them, and to a certain point they do not mind. But if you do that to a stranger on the street, somebody will smack us silly, which is normal. The same thing happens with horses. If horses are alone with their mother, and only alone with their mother, it can very well happen that they do not learn how to interact with a stranger or someone that is not as inclined to have this closeness as the mother is. So, and then there's the fact that horses are obviously weaned far too young. So in nature, it's between 9 months and 1.5 years even. And the mother can perfectly decide how much milk a foal will drink or when that stops. So what we do now often between 4 and 6 months is much too young. Then they are taken away and often put in what they call a herd with other foals. And that is like we humans would, close up kindergarten, throw food over the wall 3 times a day and say, see you in a few years. This would not educate socially accepted, well-behaved children. That would be carnage. But it's sort of the same with horses. And I remember a time, because I'm really old, I will be 50 in September. I remember when we didn't do that with horses. And when I went into a herd with young stallions, they would all just be at a distance, looking curiously at me, sniffing a little bit, but they would not come close. I would have to work to interact with them. If I do this now, I would need like artillery or something to be safe, because they would just run over me. And this is not how horses actually behave naturally at all. Horses are very much from getting away from everything. But if a horse runs into you, jumps on you, goes into your space and doesn't react to a tiny body language, you have an antisocial horse. And we have loads of those, and they are very difficult to train. But the problem is the weaning, and that the horse has not been able to grow up in a natural social function within a socially family band, and been taught that you have your personal space, others have their personal space, and also you are a prey animal who has always think of moving away before anything else. Because if you move towards pressure and towards everything, that is where predators will catch you. Obviously, when the predator has caught you, then you can use your weight as a large prey animal and try to crush the predator. But this is a last resort. And now we have a whole generation of young horses who have this last resort mindset, because they haven't been taught how to interact with their own species and others. And with every stress point they have, they're like, okay, I'll just drop on it, or walk into it, or run against it. Horses like that are so incredibly difficult to train. And then people get violent with them and they get a trauma. So then you have an antisocial horse, which is traumatized. Oh, that's a lot of work, and you can never get the same result you would have if you would just have the horse have a social, normal upbringing to at least 3.5 years of age, which is in the east of Europe actually still pretty normal practice.
If someone's listening right now, Josepha, thinking, my horse has no personal space, it doesn't know boundaries, is there any way of teaching that horse, actually, this is my space and that's your space, in an ethical and gentle manner?
For sure. You have to constantly ask your horse with your body language to move out of your space, stop him before he goes into your space, and reward the horse outside your space for not invading your space or going out of your space. And you have to do that 100% of the time. That when you are with your horse and your horse sees you, everything you do and don't do is training. So you have to do this constantly, never falter. It is tiresome, I know. But at some point, this will become the horse's default stage to react to you in that way. And only when there is stress, he will go back to drop on the predator. But then you have ways to, get that situation nipping in the bud before it actually happens. And then he will also react better to you. Secondly, is to get this horse into a functional herd where there are functional horses who are able to instruct this horse how it would function. This horse is also forever altered. It would never become the way it would have been if it was right from the start, from the imprint start. But he can learn to cope and to function in a way that will make it easier on everyone.
And before you go, we've just got a couple more questions for you, Josepha. For those who are thinking, I would love to try dressage in hand, I hadn't heard of it before today, what one exercise can they try today with their horse to make a start?
I get the question a lot, but I cannot answer it because it very much depends on the horse and where his level of education lies, what of state his body is, what he needs. So I cannot really answer this. And that is why I wrote this very thick book, which you have to read all of it. And then you know with each specific horse and each specific situation where your starting point is.
Perfect. And where can they get that book? If our listeners are thinking, I need to delve into this and use it as a horsey Bible, where can they buy that?
Everywhere. The book is worldwide available. It's been sold on all continents except Antarctica. Well, maybe in the future, who knows? And you can get it everywhere. But an easy way to find it is to go to my website and you will find it there. It also won the ECUS award in, I think, 22, which was a dream of mine, which something I would always practice with the shampoo bottle on the shower. Thank you. And that actually happened. So I'm so proud of that. So I have to tell everybody all the time, I'm sorry.
Oh, congratulations. We're thrilled for you, Josepha, and I can't wait to get a copy and delve in. Before you go, just taking you back to our first conversation about horses as pets, how do you think giving horses pet status will better their lives and their welfare when they get to be a pet?
First of all, because of the mindset toward pets, people who have dogs and cats, they don't expect them to be anything other than a dog or a cat. Of course, there are people who do dog shows and cat shows, but these are not the majority. And even when they cats, dogs cannot do it any longer, it doesn't matter. They just keep them as pets because that's what they are. So I think if horses get the pet status, when they can no longer perform or they're not the type of horse that can perform, and you cannot ride them, then it will not matter. People will just keep their horse as a pet. It will not be frowned upon. Nobody will think you're crazy or that you're throwing money away, or because a horse is just a pet and it doesn't matter if you sit on it or not, if you compete or if you just don't do anything with it, you just have a pasta ornament. I think that the mindset that will change a lot, and the horse rescues will not be overflowing with horses that cannot be ridden and so forth. So people will just keep their pet. And also, a pet does not work. So you have to make sure that your pet has his habitat in order to just, move around, play, eat, cuddle, interact with other pets, which we find normal. For a dog and a cat, we frown upon people that have this very large breed dog on a small apartment. But we do not frown upon people who keep large horses in a small bench 24 hours a day and maybe just hand graze them for 1 hour. But if we see them as pets and not working animals, we'll think, wow, why would you keep a horse in a small crate? Just create a habitat for where they can play with his friends when you're not there. Or you enjoy watching dogs play or cats play, you will also enjoy watching your horses play. That's what I enjoy most when I look at my track system and I see my horses move around and just horsing around and do whatever horses do and play together. That gives me so much satisfaction. There's nothing more boring and sad than looking at the horse in a box over his door standing like that, waiting for his hay. I mean, we would like that for a dog. Nobody likes to watch a dog in a crate or a cat in a crate. We like to watch them moving around and playing and interacting and doing things. So the pet status will also make people more aware of that, in my view. And next to that, legislation. When you see there's much more legislation for dogs and cats than there is for farm animals or livestock. And also, when you see the abuse of a dog and you call the police, I mean, here in Belgium, the police topple over each other. They don't know how fast they need to be there to get the culprit. And rightly so. But when you call for a horse, they're like, it's a horse and he's working and probably it's not that bad. Also, the horse is not screaming, so he's probably not in pain. Thanks to Project X, and the indictment that befalls Hellstrand, I think in Europe, I am an ex-police officer, and I am still in contact with police officers. And if we all start now filming abuse, we go to the police, the more we do it, the more it becomes mainstream to indict people for it. And also, police officers have more and more the ability that dossier will not be put in the back corner or just dismissed. When there will be a ruling in Europe, we have the first ruling from Lonneke Engel, the model and friend of mine I spoke about before. The next ruling will be the Hellestrand case. There will be more. Other judges will not dismiss cases because they have an example of how they should and could rule. And the last point, as I said, legislation will change. At the moment in separate European countries, but also in the European Union, they are investigating the welfare of horses and donkeys within the European Union. And they are looking for the scientific evidence that supports what is species appropriate to them. I'm working with the task force and sending them out all the research that I have in this matter. And everybody can always send research to me. If I have it, okay, but if I don't have it, so far the better. The more research we have to convince the legislatures, the better it is. So, and this investigation should be done in 2026, and then they will advise the lawmakers to adjust laws where necessary. So I feel that solitary confinement and keeping in box will be, I will not say prohibited, but it might be that there will be rule change about that. Not in the last case, because also if you create a habitat for your horse, instead of having concrete buildings, but a track system that works with the local natural surroundings, is also very good for biodiversity. So that is also a thing, because for lawmakers at the moment, government, everything should be green, green, green. That is very green. Plus, European Union wants to phase out concrete buildings completely between 2030 and 2050. So if they don't want concrete buildings for humans, do you think they want them for horses? I think not. So I'm looking forward to great changes, but I'm also warning that if we want to, as people say, enjoy our horses and keep them as pets, but also want to continue to keep them as performance horses and work with them or whatnot, there are things we have to change now. We have to change it now. And if we don't, it will change. It might take some time, but they will change it for us, and maybe not in the way we would like. To me personally, it doesn't matter anymore either way. I just want the abuse of horses to end, and I want horses to be able to live species appropriately. And I don't want them to be in any danger when they can no longer perform or be ridden. I just want them to be loved as an individual, as a person, as a horse, as a pet, as a family member, no matter what befalls them. And I think that is what they deserve after, again, 6,000 years of incredible service. I think it's time we start repaying them.
Josepha, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for delving deep in some really difficult conversations and topics: horse welfare, horse abuse, how we treat our horses, how we perceive our horses. Thank you so much for opening our minds and taking us into your world for a little while. If someone's listening and they think, I want to go and find Josepha and her book, where can they find you online and on social media?
Very simple, dressageinhand.com or .eu. And if you Google my name, you will find all my social media, Josepha Guillaume. Facebook is Josepha Guillaume. Instagram is Josepha_Guillaume. And if you Google me, I'm not difficult to find.
Josepha, thank you so much for coming on Curious Equestrian.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to spread my message.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way, or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.